Introduce the first presenter in the engineering block, which is Marina Pancheva. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Marina Pancheva, Director of Linguistics AI Services at RWS, and one of the few people on this planet who can teach you Danish syntax and explain nanosyntax without breaking a sweat. She's a hyper polyglot and co-founder of the AI Localization think tank. And Marina brings both academic rigor and industry savvy to the rapidly evolving world of AI in localization. She holds a PhD in theoretical linguistics, that's a mouthful, and has taught across Europe and has led high-performing teams transforming localization workflows with LLMs. Her passion for language clarity is contagious, which may explain why even her AI models are unusually articulate. Oh, and as a fellow Dutch speaker, I can confirm her multilingual superpowers are very real. Welcome to the show. Goedemorgen vanuit Texas. Get ready for one of the most anticipated talks of the conference. And in her session, Marina is going to deliver hands-on prompt engineering advice designed for a wide audience. Take it away, Marina.
Thank you very much for this amazing introduction. Let me go straight away into presentation mode. And please just confirm that you can see the title slide.
Yes. See it.
Only Stefan doesn't see it, but I can see many thumbs up coming up.
I see it just fine. Yep.
That means, okay, so let's go right away. So as Stefan said, today we're going to talk about prompting. This is the first presentation from the engineering block. And Stefan came up with this title, Prompting with Purpose. So I thought that sounds very interesting. I stole it for my presentation. It was originally called Prompting in 2025. And then the subtitle is Hands-on Advice for a Wide Audience. And because this is really a very wide audience, I thought to start from the very beginning and clarify the terminology. So let's first go through the terminology we're going to be using, or at least I'm going to be using in this presentation. There are 6 basic concepts in AI which I want to align with you on so that we know we mean the very same things when we say them. The first one is prompt, and that's clear. Prompt, this is your input to any AI system through which you want to get some results. The next one is tokens, and I guess all of you here, the entire wide audience, know that tokens are those elements into which LLM break down words, and the relation between words and tokens is not really straightforward. It's one for one language, is different for another language. So sometimes, you can be surprised at the count of tokens that come to you from Japanese. For example, they can be 6 times more than for English. Then we have the term completion, and this is just a way to call the response of an LLM to a prompt. You can also call it output, simply output or response or completion. Then we are getting a little bit more sophisticated, so let's talk about what primary content is. Well, primary content is basically the content that you want the LLM to do something with. For example, you may want to have an LLM translate a segment for you. The segment that you send for translation is going to be your primary content. You may want it to consider terminology and style guide rules. Those are primary content.
Looks like we've lost Marina there for a second.
There's a storm in the Czech Republic. Maybe something has happened.
That's how much it remembers.
Marina, finally, there was an internet blip. You disappeared for about 15 seconds.
So what did you lose then?
We lost you. We can't continue without
no, but
you.
Where did you lose me? It's clear you lost me, but where did you lose me?
Rewind maybe 10-15 seconds and go. I think we're still on the good track, Marina.
Let's go. So did you hear about completion?
Maybe start from there. Yeah, start from there.
Yeah. So completion is basically the response of an LLM to a prompt. Okay, so you can call it completion, or you can call it output, or you can simply call it response. Then getting more sophisticated, we are moving to primary content. Primary content is basically the content that you want your LLM to do something with. So in a prompt, you have instructions, for example, translate, and then you have primary content. And that would be the sentence that you want the LLM to translate. If you want to put in terminology or style guide rules, then those are going to be your primary content as well. Now, getting even more sophisticated, let's talk about context window. Put very simply, this is simply the volume of tokens that an LLM can keep in its operational memory, how much it remembers, how much fits in its memory. And finally, we have shot, and this is simply a very fancy way to say examples. So whenever you have an example in your prompt, we call it a shot. So this is the basic terminology. And now let's move kind of a little bit away from the details and look what happened in the LLM world over the past 36 months. And whenever I look at this, I always think about, the development, the cognitive development of a human, because I can clearly see 4 periods: infancy, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. Why that? Well, in the very beginning, we had LLMs that were simply amazing imitators. Just like little kids, they would repeat, actually, when you prompt them, they will repeat the prompt and they would just imitate what they have seen in their training data. So if you ask them a question, they won't answer the question. They will repeat the question and then go on with the next most plausible thing, but that's not going to be the answer. They would just repeat. Then we got the children LLMs. This is when AI exploded. This is when it actually entered our world of localization. This is GPT 3.5 and similar models, which were actually trained to follow instructions. So now when we asked them a question or that we told them to do something, they didn't simply imitate the question. They actually did the things we wanted them to do. So you say translate and they translate. But then we moved on further and got agentic AI. Now, with agentic AI, that's a lot like with teenagers. You tell them what to do, but you better not tell them how to do it. You'd better not give very exact instructions, because then it's not going to go well, right? So agentic AI are way more autonomous, just like teenagers, and they need to be given goal and purpose, and then they pursue it. And finally, we got the reasoning models like GPT-01, 03, and the famous DeepSeek R1, R2, right? Who can actually follow deliberate reasoning steps, and they kind of think before they do something. They answer just like a mature human. How did that affect the way we prompt? Well, our prompting strategies changed as well. So with the pre-trained models, who were simply imitators, what we had to do is put in our prompts tons of examples, little shots, so that they know, as they imitate the examples, they know what to do. But then the researchers said, oh, well, we need to put so many examples in our prompts. Why don't we put those in the training data, actually? So they started creating instruction sets with thousands of example pairs, question, answer, request, response, and they actually trained the models to follow instructions. So we got the instruction fine-tuned models. Now, how did we prompt those? Well, when we were prompting them, we needed to put chain of thought, reasoning steps in the prompts. And then, of course, the researchers said, well, let's put it in the training data. So they created these large training sets with hundreds of thousands of examples of chain of thought reasoning, and they got the reasoning models. Okay, how do we prompt the reasoning models? Well, to prompt a reasoning model effectively, we need to provide goal and context. So if we logically continue this path, then the next step would be, honestly, I don't know what, but logically, we would be training models on goals and context, which sounds already a bit spooky. But I honestly don't know what is coming up, because there is this problem. The field develops so fast. I'm constantly having the feeling that I'm living in some continuous Zeno paradox of Achilles and the tortoise. For those of you who don't know, that's a very old paradox where Achilles constantly is trying to catch a tortoise, and he can only half the distance to the tortoise, which means that mathematically Achilles will never ever catch the tortoise, because the distance will converge to zero, but never be zero. And I have the feeling that as we are trying to chase the developments of the latest AI frontier models and whatever comes up, we are only halving the distance to it. And whenever we think we're almost there and we're going to catch it and we're going to be up there where, the frontier labs are, suddenly something new comes up. And then we find out that, oh no, there's still more to run. Yeah, but now let's not be that pessimistic and go into prompts. Whenever I'm talking about prompts, my first question is, how do you prompt? Do you prompt for pilots or do you prompt for production? Because it's different. Prompting just, on a daily basis to run a pilot or test something is more like cooking in your own kitchen, right? Where you have like small portions, little data sets, you have your selected ingredients, your data that you know very well, you have your prompts and they're tested like your grandma's recipe. Usually there's just one prompt designer who cooks and the prompt designer can continuously manually, evaluate and kind of gauge the output. This type of prompting, what I call prompting for pilot, is typically what we do when we communicate or like prompt AI through a chat environment like GPT, Chat GPT. Then we use natural language, but we don't use pure prompts. Whenever we prompt through a chat environment, we always get the system prompt imposed on top of our prompt, the system prompt of the provider. You can go read it. If you put Claude system prompt, you're going to get a 3-page prompt, which is very interesting to read. And that prompt influences our prompt and can cause behavior that is unexpected, which is what happened with Gemini when it's generated Black African American founding fathers. That was because of the system prompt. Another thing when chatting with AI and prompting through a chat environment is that the chat environment is created in a way that it ensures contextual continuity. The generated prompt, the one that you send, is actually not the one you think you're sending. You kind of drag along all the previous messages that you have had in the chat session. This is incremental prompting. So if you prompt with one prompt and you get output, next question you ask in the chat environment is actually going to take with itself the prompt, the first prompt and the first output to the first prompt. And that's going to generate output too. And then the next question you are sending in the chat environment will drag along the first prompt, the first output, the second prompt, the second output, and so it's going to grow incrementally. You drag along everything. This is why you should never change topic in the same chat session, because as you change topic, you will be still dragging with your prompt all the previous prompt on a different topic. And then, of course, the LLM is going to provide weird answers. Another problem with this is the context window. Suppose it's that big, it can only fit 3 things. Then gradually, the LLM will start forgetting older information in your session. Still, this is very useful for brainstorming or answering questions or getting assistance and for very quick proof of concepts, just checking whether an LLM can do something or not. But if you're going to really go production, then your prompt kitchen is going to look like this. You will going to be dealing with giant quantities of translation memories with millions of segments, term bases with thousands of terms. You will have to work with rare ingredients. We already heard today, right? Low resource languages, something that the LLMs may not have been trained on. You will have multiple orders. You need to support continuous production, very complex infrastructure of your tools, and many cooks involved. And this already means prompting via an API, which is another way of prompting for scalable mass prompting. For that, you will already need some technical knowledge to manage rate limits, to manage authentication, and so on. But you have full control over your prompt and its parameters. However, you don't have contextual continuity. So the context information will have to be included in every call. What that means is that when you send one prompt, you get one output. You send your second prompt, you get your second output. You don't drag along the previous prompts. You send your third prompt, you get your third output. And with each API call, you're basically sending everything in isolation. There is no context. This is very useful for automated workflows or repeatable tasks or large-scale operations, and when you want to integrate AI in your applications, right, in your CAT tool and so on. But there is a big problem with that, and I call that the token overhead problem. The problem is that sometimes we develop very sophisticated prompts, and the count of tokens in the prompts themselves outweigh the tokens of the text you want to process. So, for example, you may have a 3,000 token prompt about how to translate, including style guide information, terminology, and so on. And then the segment to which you want to apply that one may be 5 tokens. So do you want to pay 3,000 tokens to translate a 5-token segment? No, it looks like the ratio token and primary tokens of the prompt and the primary content is really bad. There are 2 solutions I can offer here. Number one is you can group the text segments that you want to translate into batches. So then you send 1 token, but you already have 50 segments that you can translate with this 1 token. However, there could be leakage from segment 1 to segment 50, because this all goes together to the LLM, and because of the way attention mechanism works, maybe something from first segment will sieve into another segment. So you have to carefully wrap every segment in tags to avoid that leakage. You can also concatenate, but then you have to make sure that you use a delimiter that the LLM preserves, because LLMs try to get rid of all weirdly looking symbols that are not language. So if you put 3 times a column mark or things like that, they may just clean it away. And finally, you can use IDs. But if you use IDs, beware of ID shift. Sometimes LLMs, they just put in an extra number just like that, and they cause a resource shift all the way down. So suddenly all your translation mismatch your source segments just by 1, but they're wrong. Another solution would be to extract into the prompt the reference information that is relevant to the process segments. I've seen prompts where the entire style guide is shoved in and the entire glossary, which contains 100 terms, but only 2 terms are actually present in the segment that the LLM is to process. So extract only those 2 terms. Extract only those style guide rules that apply to that segment. For example, the segment addresses a user, extract only those style guide rules that apply to user address. You don't need to have style guide rules about something that is totally irrelevant. For example, how to translate UI buttons. Okay, next important topic, which I hope I will see covered more often in our conferences, is what is the difference between prompting for agentic AI and prompting for non-agentic AI? You've all heard about AI agents. Joao was talking today about that, and there is a difference in how we prompt them. When we're prompting the regular one-pass LLMs, we are basically asking a question. And in this question or a query, we are sending step-by-step instructions. We provide context and references. We specify what the desired output should be, how long, in what format, and we give a few examples. And what we get back from the LLM is a response in the form of an answer or some sort of converted output. For example, you can say, please change that segment from informal to formal address, or convert from English to Spanish, right? The primary failure that we can expect here is either wrong or irrelevant answers, or somehow incorrectly formatted or converted segments. With agentic prompting, it's totally different. There, we have to give the goal. We have to specify the goal, and we have to define what success means for the agent. We need to give the agent the catalog of available tools so that the agent knows what tool, what function calls they can make, what tools they can use. We need to explain the method to the agent. Are you planning? Are you acting? And we need to explain what the guardrails are and what are the exit criteria. Where does this whole thing stop? And the LLM output that we get then is either a plan, this is how we should proceed, an action, it makes a tool call, or a decision, it can be a termination signal. Here is where we stop. And the primary failures are wrong action or overspending tokens. Like really, if it's an iterative, it's kind of a society of mind type of agentic AI, the agents can be talking with each other so much that suddenly, your token cost explodes. Okay.
Marina, we're sitting on the edge of our seat following your presentation. This is really, really useful information and great clarification. We started a couple of minutes late for you,
yes.
So I want to be gracious and let you do the full 20 minutes. But I just want to flag to you that we're at 21 right now. I'm going to let you go to 25, and then maybe we can do one or two questions. And then we'll move on to the next speaker.
That's what I was counting on. So
all right,
let me continue. I was counting on 20 minutes. We started 5 minutes late. So finally, just a few tips from me. When you prompt, try to use AI to tell you how to prompt AI. Have an LLM actually, have the LLM that you want to use to execute formulate the prompt for you. In this way, it will come with the formulation that matches its training data best. Another trick is to ask the model that you plan to use for the task to actually explain what the task consists of, check it, and where it's wrong in the task explanation, it will also be wrong in the task execution. And finally, try to use the most advanced model that you have available to draft the prompt. For example, a reasoning model. Last minute is how to troubleshoot prompts. First of all, if your prompt's not working, break down all instructions into atomic steps. If that doesn't work, then try to separate them in individual prompts and daisy chain those instructions. If that still doesn't work, pull in more data. Try to provide more context. If that doesn't work, well, then try to clean your data. Maybe your data is confusing. If that doesn't work, go and use a more advanced LLM model, but there you may need an engineer because maybe you will have to change a bit how you send your prompt. And finally, if that doesn't work, go try a different provider. And then again, you may need an engineer there. And with that, I'm finished. And I just want to encourage you all to keep prompting and let's go catch the AI tortoise. Thank you very much. Time for questions.
I'm gonna fire off a question right away, and then we can maybe take one other from the audience. In your experience, Marina, what's the single most powerful tweak someone can make to improve their prompts?
I will answer with a single most powerful word, and that is get your data clean.
Okay.
It's your data.
It's the data.
Prompting is 50. We were calculating it once, really. Prompting is 46% success comes from data preparation, and the remaining 54% come from prompt preparation. So data and prompt, they go together. Like as you develop your prompt, you have to prepare your data as well.
Very well.
Next question.
I'm having a question here from Zaylan, and he says, do you see any difference between the performance of reasoning or non-reasoning models, one way or another, in linguistic context?
Yes, non-reasoning models are easier to work with for us, but to process text because they're more obedient. They, for example, stick very well to the format that you want them to stick to. So they will simply return to you the segment that you've sent, right? Reasoning models still tend to sneak in reasoning in their responses. So they will do what you want them to do, but it's very hard to stop them from explaining why they did it. So they pollute, right? The completion is polluted with additional tokens that you don't want to have there.
All right, one last question, and then we move on to the next speaker. What's the most relevant use case for prompting in a traditional translation model?
Most relevant, can you say it again? What does that mean?
Now the question's been removed. They're not, maybe
Everything's
they weren't ready
relevant.
to ask it.
Everything.
Maybe and there's one more from Nicola, and it says, when using LLMs, is segmentation and TMs becoming a liability instead of an asset?
Yes, it does. It's better to, LLMs are better at whole document translation and generally processing, whole documents. But there are tricks where you can compensate for that, but that's for some other presentation.
All right, good. Thank you so much, Marina. I think we all want an hour or two of coaching with you, so you could make a side business out of that, I'm sure, after this presentation. Fascinating. We are going to move on to the second presenter.